Hey folks, Chris from Some Fun Guys here. Today we're going to talk through making your own grain spawn. You use grain spawn to inoculate your bulk substrate, whether that's straw pellets or wood pellets or straw or whatever you want to, coffee grounds, whatever you want to grow on. A really simple method of doing this. There are many different ways of doing this, but I'm going to talk you through the easiest and most simple way of making your own grain spawn. The only technical piece of equipment that you do need is a pressure cooker, but I'll get to that in a minute. So there are many ways to make grain spawn, and there's a lot of different information telling you what to do on the internet. I'm going to make it super simple and teach you the easiest way to do it, the least effort in terms of your labour, and you still get really good results for growing oyster mushrooms. So first of all, you want to get hold of a bunch of jars. Ideally, you want to get them the same size and at least 500 ml. When you're putting in your grain, you don't want to fill it up to about a third, more than a third, because the grains will swell throughout the process. So the grains we're going to be using are whole wheat berries. A lot of people use rye or oats or birdseed or popcorn. I find wheat berries good because I can get them really cheap at horse feed stores, and it's just chicken feed. I can pay like £6 or £7 for about a 20 kilo sack, whereas if I'm buying it from a real food store, you're going to be paying probably 5 to 10 times that price. Then you want to get your lids and you want to drill 2 holes in it. The first hole is for your self-healing injection pot, and the second hole is for an air filter. You can buy self-healing injection pots and you can buy air filters, but for the self-healing injection pots, you're going to be using glue to glue them in, so you might as well just put a blob of silicone on and it does just as good a job, and you don't then have to, you just put more silicone on as those holes wear through. Next, for the air filter, I find trying to glue an air filter onto a lid, trying to find the right glue is just a bit, I've struggled to find a decent glue that holds up to the pressure cooker. Now, micropore tape does a good enough job. Now, you do need to replace it every time you sterilize your grains, but I find just a patch of tape on either side of the lid does an absolutely fine job of filtering it. I use 3M micropore tape. You can just buy that at any pharmacist. So in this 500 ml jar, I've got 150 grams of wheat berries, and then I add water at a rate of 70 grams of water per 100 grams of grains. So in this jar, I've then added 105 grams of water, and then I've left it to soak for 24 hours. So as it's soaked, the grains have now swollen. They've gone about 50% of the jar now. Before we sterilize this, we're just gonna give it a nice bash up, just so then the distribution of the grains is just more even in terms of if there's any difference in hydration. So next, what we're going to do is get some tin foil, and we're just going to cover the top of this. When it's in the pressure cooker, there will be condensation that drips down, and we don't want that to land on the filter, because if your filter gets particularly wet, then bacteria and fungal spores can actually make their way through. So next, I'm going to put that inside my pressure cooker. You can do this with a stovetop pressure cooker, but if you haven't already, if you're going to buy something, I would 100% recommend getting an electric pressure cooker. They are so much better than stovetop ones. Stovetop pressure cookers, they make a lot of noise, they'll boil dry, you need to keep an eye on it. There's always the fear that it's going to explode. Whereas an electric pressure cooker, there's no smell, there's barely any noise. You can run it whilst you're asleep, and it doesn't lose moisture throughout the process. I use an instant pot. This is their biggest one. This is 8 litres. As you can see, I can fit 7 jars in this at one time. I bought this on eBay, £52, second hand, absolute bargain. There's a little bit of water in the bottom of there, but it's just straight into there. And then apply the lid, and I'm going to hit pressure cooker, and I'm going to pressure cook for 2 hours. Close the valve and just let that run. It should crack on in a sec. So when you're sterilizing grains, ideally you want to be getting up to 15 psi, but electric and stovetop pressure cookers have an operating psi of about 11, so they'll have a maximum capacity of 15, but they'll have an operating pressure of about 11 or 12. So you want that heat and pressure, but because we're not going quite as high as an autoclave would, basically just going to add an extra half an hour. So if it consistently stay at 15, I would only sterilize these grains for an hour and a half. I'm going to do this, and then once these grains are sterilized, I'm going to let the pressure cooker cool down naturally on its own, and then take the jars out, and then you can inoculate them either through injecting liquid mycelium or through grain-to-grain transfer or agar, whatever method you want to do for inoculating your grain jars. But I'm going to leave this for the next 2 hours and come back, see you later. So what we've got here is a nice sterilised jar of wheat berries. The ones at the top are a little bit less cooked than the ones at the bottom. They've kind of stuck together a little bit, but we're going to just distribute them nice and evenly across the entire jar. So you're going to wait until it's very cold, because if you do this whilst it's warm, it's going to expel air and then pull air back in. But all we're just going to do is bash the jar up and break that pot up and get it nicely evenly distributed across the jar. There we go. This jar is now ready for inoculation, either through injecting liquid mycelium, agar, or grain-to-grain transfer. So first thing that you need to do is get yourself a nice draft-free workspace, clean it, sanitize it, clear it, make sure you've got nothing nearby. Then you're going to lay out some tin foil. That creates a nice clean surface for you to work on. I'm going to sanitize my hands just with 70% ethanol. Always use 70%, it's more effective than 100%, but we should all know that because we've just lived through a pandemic. So the mushroom mycelium's ready to go. So I'm going to use a syringe that I've reusing, but I've sterilized in a pressure cooker for 20 minutes, just wrapped up in tin foil and then left upright. I'm going to take the tin foil off the top of my jar, and I'm going to spray that pot and this pot with some ethanol. Whilst I let that dry, I'm going to just flame sterilize the syringe. Just get it red hot. Now you want a thick gauge on your syringe. If it's too thin, you won't be able to pull up any mycelium. So I stick the needle in, and I'm just going to tip it over, and I'm going to pull up a syringe full of mycelium. Now you can just buy a syringe like that off the internet and use it if you're only making one jar, but you can turn one syringe easily into a litre, and you can use that to inoculate 100 jars. So this is going to get incubated at about 25 degrees C for a couple of weeks. Once it's about a third of the way colonised, I'll shake up the jar That's going to break up the mycelium, get it nice evenly colonized. And then after maybe 3 weeks, it's going to start looking like this. Now this is ready to get put into my fruiting substrate and start producing some fruiting blocks.